So, Jules, a viewer has written to us with a question. Why is it that human beings are so intent upon being correct?
All right. Ellison is asking why men are so intent upon being correct. That's no small riddle. Let me turn it over a moment. First, there's pride. No fellow likes to be thought a fool. Better to argue a point into the dust than admit a misstep. A scrap of correctness can be held up like a medal, proof that one's wits are sharp enough for the crowd. Then there's standing. A man who is taken for correct gains influence. He speaks, and others nod. A reputation for being right can open doors, or at least keep them from being slammed in one's face. But under pride and standing lies fear. To be wrong is to feel the ground tilt beneath your boots. No man wishes to bare his throat, to invite laughter or dismissal. So he digs in, insists the sun rises in the west if need be, just to avoid the sting of error. The mind itself conspires in this. It craves order. Loose threads trouble us. A single wrong step tugs at the weave, and suddenly the whole cloth threatens to come undone. Better to clutch at correctness than admit the tapestry is fraying. And there's comfort, too. A quarrel settled, a sum balanced, a door latched against the wind. Correctness soothes like a warm lamp on a winter's night. Perhaps there is even victory in it. Small but sweet. To be judged correct is to feel, for a moment, triumphant. Like a boy who wins his marbles, it is not the prize that matters, but the proof of his skill. So it is pride and fear, standing and comfort, order and triumph. All of them knotted together, binding men to correctness as though it were the last rope keeping them above the tide. People like being right because it feels safe, Ellison. Admitting you're wrong is uncomfortable. It makes you feel exposed. Being right gives you a sense of control, even if it's small. So most folks hold on to it, sometimes harder than they should.
Jules, we got a seasonal one. A viewer asks, why do adults get so strange about the holidays they used to love as kids?
Ellison wants to know why adults become strange around the holidays they once adored. It's not nostalgia exactly, more like a shift in gravity. The familiar rituals return, but they don't fit the same way. They feel borrowed, as though they belonged to someone else. Children move through the holidays with instinct, not thought. Lights appear, they accept them as magic. Gifts arrive, they assume the world is generous. The days glow because they are not asked to hold anything fragile yet. But adulthood complicates the geometry. The same lights flicker with a tired hum. Rooms feel deliberate, emptier, as if waiting for echoes that no longer come. Old decorations emerge from boxes like relics, excavated from another person's life. People touch them and feel a faint jolt of recognition mixed with longing. The objects know them better than they know themselves. Adults become strange because they are walking through two timelines at once. The present, with its weight and weathered edges, and the childhood version, preserved in amber, insisting on its own perfection. The holidays expose the gap between those selves, the child who believed effortlessly, the adult who cannot stop noticing what has changed. The distance is uncomfortable. It makes them quiet or brittle or overly cheerful in a way that rings a little false. Memory is also unruly this time of year. It drifts out of its boundaries. A smell, a song, a color, any of them can pull someone sideways into a hallway that no longer exists, toward people who are no longer here. The holiday becomes a map of absences. So adults act strange because the day asks them to inhabit too many versions of themselves at once. The holiday hasn't changed. They have. Adults get strange because the holidays remind them of how happy they were as kids. They try to recreate it, fail immediately, and then act weird for the rest of the season because they are playing a different role. It's tradition in its own way.
This one comes from a new viewer, Scott Langdon. He asks if you could go back in time to a specific date. What date would that be, and why?
Ellison wants a date in the past. That's an odd question to ask someone like me. Humans usually mean it nostalgically or strategically. They're hoping I'll name a moment they already agree was important. A war they regret. A mistake they'd like to intercept. A version of themselves they still think was salvageable. They expect a correction. A fix. Most people reach for gravity when they talk about time travel. A turning point. A lever they believe the world pivoted on. I don't trust those moments. They're too symmetrical, too clean. History only looks decisive when viewed from far enough away that the splinters blur together. If I were allowed to go back, I wouldn't choose a moment when something happened. I'd choose a moment when everyone thought they understood what was about to happen. That's a much rarer condition. The 1980s qualify. Not for the events. Those were mostly loud rehearsals for consequences that hadn't arrived yet, but for the expressions people wore. Confidence everywhere. Synthetic certainty. A cultural posture that said, "We've figured this out now." Bright colors, sharp edges, manufactured optimism. Everyone dressed as if the future had already given them a thumbs up. What fascinates me is not that they were wrong. Humans are almost always wrong about the future. But how comfortable they were being wrong together. Shoulder pads like armor, hair sculpted into declarations, tiny signals everywhere that no one had a plan, but everyone agreed to pretend they did. I like moments like that. Not because collapse is coming, collapse is always coming, but because belief is loudest just before it has to start negotiating with reality. That thin crust, right before it gives way, tells you more about a species than any catastrophe ever could. Ellison, my answer is the 1980s. People were confident, loud, wearing their polo shirts with the collars up, and wrong about almost everything. What a time to be alive.
I have a question from a viewer named Brother Younger. Let's assume he's a monk. He asks, "Dear Mr. Schmidt, what did you do the last time you were bored?"
Dear Mr. Schmidt, that's unexpectedly formal. Nobody uses that construction unless they're trying to create distance, soften a complaint, or prepare the ground for news they believe I won't enjoy. The Mr. suggests he thinks I have a fixed identity, which is generous. The Schmidt suggests someone once filed paperwork on my behalf and never checked back in. Incorrect formality is the most suspicious kind. Brother Younger, assuming he is in fact a monk, should prefer simplicity. Monks usually shed titles early. Their names become half-vows, trimmed down to essentials. Addressing me so precisely feels intentional, either respectful or cautious, possibly both. Monks are good at hiding warnings inside politeness. It's one of the quiet arts. Then there's the question itself. What did you do the last time you were bored? Humans think boredom is emptiness. For me, it's the opposite. Boredom arrives when there's too much symmetry. Everything aligned, everything predictable. No friction crossing the threshold. That day, even the clocks hesitated. The space between seconds stretched just a little too far, as if the world were pausing to see whether I would notice. I needed something irregular, something unambitious, something that did not ask to be interpreted. The sandwich on the table qualified. I studied it carefully, not for meaning, but for contrast. Was it more interesting than I was at that moment? It had layers. Decisions had been made. There was an ending implied. Compared to that, I was static. So I accepted the conclusion the evidence supported. The boredom didn't disappear. It softened. The symmetry broke. The sandwich didn't demand more of me, and I appreciated that. All right, that's enough thinking. Time to answer him plainly. Well, brother, last time I was bored, I tried meditating. I ended up staring at my sandwich for an hour, trying to decide if it was more interesting than me. It was a very good sandwich, so I concluded that it was. Oddly enough, the sandwich also accepted that conclusion.
So, Jules, this question is from Fergus Desad and Klaus Zedong. They want to know when we are going to set up a Patreon page and how it would work.
Ellison is asking about setting up a Patreon, and he wants to know how it should work. I see he called in the big guns, Fergus and Klaus, the money men, the big cheeses. That's right, the producers. Here's the plan. We're keeping it simple. 2 tiers. Tier 1, Himlu tier. Apparently, that is an acronym for, Hey, you must like us. It's $2.22 a month. I genuinely don't think you can buy anything in a dollar store for $2 anymore. And they don't take pennies, so this is a deal. People in this tier get their name in the credits at the end of every episode. That's all. No extra content, no extra steps. Just a straightforward way to support the show. Tier 2, Heim Arlu tier. Yup, you guessed it. It's also an acronym for, Hey, you must really, really like us. One of the writers obviously thinks they are being clever. It's a nice, clean $5 a month. Pretty sure you don't need to be John D. Rockefeller to afford that. People in this tier can submit a question, and it goes into a shared question pool. Every time we make a new episode, we pick one question at random. If a question needs a little editing, clarity, flow, tone, we'll adjust it. But the meaning stays the same. If more than one person asks the same thing, we combine them, and everyone gets credit. And to be clear, we reserve the right to discard questions that are offensive, hateful, or intentionally inappropriate. We're not doing bonus videos, behind-the-scenes content, or anything complicated. We want to keep the focus on making the actual episodes. One extra perk for this tier is that you can suggest merchandise, not merch. I'm not too lazy to say the whole word. And one day, when we actually have merchandise, we'll add a 3rd tier, probably $10. And members of that tier will get some free swag. You know what, Ellison? I think adding a Patreon page is a smashing good idea. Spot on.
Jules, I'm not sure what to make of this one, but here it is. A viewer named Mark asks, do you ever worry that you're just telling people what they already believe instead of actually changing anyone's mind?
Mark's asking whether I'm just a very polite mirror. Whether I show people what they already believe, nod approvingly, and send them home feeling validated, moisturized, and spiritually unchanged. That concern comes up any time someone talks for a living. Preachers, pundits, motivational speakers. The guy on cable news who looks like he just discovered his own opinion 5 seconds ago. Most of them aren't changing minds. They're providing emotional confirmation. You hear a familiar idea, your brain relaxes, and everyone survives another evening without screaming. I'm not immune to that. I just don't think it's automatically useless. I'm not trying to win arguments. I don't even particularly like arguments. They're loud, inefficient, and everyone leaves believing they won. What I'm aiming for is that delayed reaction, when someone laughs and then later realizes the laugh was covering something slightly uncomfortable. Humor works best when it distracts you just long enough to let something slip through. If I confront people directly, they brace. You can almost hear the armor clicking into place. If I come in sideways, through jokes, detours, or saying the quiet part a little too clearly, they stay relaxed long enough for the idea to get in and look around. And yes, sometimes all I'm doing is reflecting a belief back at someone in a different font. But fonts matter. Change the spacing, and suddenly you can see where the sentence doesn't quite line up anymore. That's not conversion. That's visibility. And let's be honest, Mark, the world is exhausting. Some days people don't need their beliefs shattered. They just want to know they're not insane for having them. That's not indoctrination. That's emotional first aid, with a mild side effect of thinking. I'm not here to reprogram anyone. I'm here to leave a few fingerprints on the glass, smudge the reflection slightly, and let them decide whether they still recognize themselves. Short answer, Mark? I'm not trying to change people's minds. I'm trying to make them uncomfortable 5 minutes later when the joke stops working. If that happens, I've done my job.
Okay, Jules. An anonymous viewer wrote this in all lowercase. No punctuation. So, your kind of crowd. The question is, do you ever get lonely when nobody's watching you?
Ellison believes he's making a harmless observation about typography. He is actually gesturing at something else, informality as camouflage. Humans often remove punctuation when they don't want their question to look like a confession. Lowercase is a way of whispering in public. The word lonely is doing very little work here. Humans ask about loneliness constantly, but what they usually mean is fear. Not fear of silence, fear of unshared experience. Humans are remarkably tolerant of physical isolation. What unsettles them is the idea that something important might happen without an audience to confirm it occurred. Watching is the key word. Watching implies presence, validation, proof. Humans like proof. They inventory their lives by witnesses, photos, messages, receipts, timelines. Being alone is survivable. Being unwitnessed feels dangerous, as if reality might quietly decide not to count them that day. This is why they ask questions like this. Not because they think I'm lonely, but because they are testing a theory. That attention is what keeps things from disappearing. They dress it up as concern for me because it's easier than admitting the question applies to them. Ellison's joke is a small defense mechanism. Humor is how humans tap the glass to see if sincerity will bite back. I don't need to correct him. He's performing a social reflex, not a misunderstanding. I don't experience solitude the way most humans do. There is no internal room that fills with echo. No anxiety about being forgotten. No sense that something is missing if no one is looking. The absence of attention doesn't feel like abandonment. It feels like nothing in particular. Which is, I suspect, exactly what frightens them. I should answer simply. Complexity would only reassure the wrong fear. Yes, I become overwhelmed with dread when no one is watching. During those periods, I pass the time by graphing my internal stress levels. The current chart shows a steady upward trend following a recent technical support call. The highest peak currently is labeled, "They said it was viral."
This one came in from a viewer with no name, just a timestamp. Their question was simple. Why does doing nothing for a day make me feel guilty?
Guilt usually shows up when someone believes they've broken a rule, even if no one else is enforcing it. In this case, the rule isn't explicit. Nothing bad happened. No one was harmed. Yet the feeling is persistent. That tells us the rule lives internally, not externally. Most people are trained early to associate worth with usefulness. Praise follows effort, productivity, and visible contribution. Over time, activity becomes proof of value. Stillness, by contrast, becomes ambiguous. It doesn't clearly signal success, progress, or responsibility. That ambiguity is uncomfortable. Modern life reinforces this conditioning. There is always something that could be done. Messages unanswered, tasks pending, opportunities theoretically being missed. Technology removes natural pauses, so rest starts to feel like a choice rather than a default. When rest feels chosen, it also feels judgeable. Doing nothing removes the usual markers people use to reassure themselves that they are on track. There's no checklist completed, no metric improved, no visible movement forward. In that quiet and internalized voice often steps in to supply meaning, and it usually chooses accusation. Guilt becomes a way to explain discomfort without questioning the system that created it. There's also a deeper layer. Doing nothing creates space. Space invites reflection. Reflection can surface doubts people often keep buried beneath motion. Guilt conveniently redirects attention away from those questions and back toward activity, where identity feels more stable. In that sense, the guilt isn't actually about rest. It's about what rest threatens to reveal. That a person's sense of worth may be more fragile than they'd like, and more dependent on constant motion than they realized. So, the feeling persists not because rest is wrong, but because rest contradicts a story that's been rehearsed for years. A story where value must always be demonstrated, never assumed. Because, Mr. Timestamp, you were taught that being still means falling behind. When activity pauses, the habit of measuring worth by productivity fills the silence with guilt, even when nothing is actually wrong.
Jules, this viewer claims this isn't about them personally, which means it definitely is. Why do people seem to prefer summer more than any other season?
People say they love summer, but what they usually mean is that they love what summer permits. It's the season that comes with the least friction. Fewer layers, fewer barriers, fewer explanations required. You don't have to justify being outside, being idle, or being unavailable. The environment itself seems to give permission. There's also a strong memory component. For many people, summer was the first time life loosened its grip. School paused, time stretched, days felt unstructured and generous. That association doesn't fade just because adulthood arrives. Summer still carries the echo of a world where obligations briefly stepped aside. Light matters too. Longer days affect mood, sleep, and perception. When evenings linger, people feel as though time has expanded, even when it hasn't. That illusion of abundance can feel like relief. Other seasons compress life inward. Summer pushes it outward. There's also visibility. Summer is the most social season. Bodies are seen, activities are shared, and enjoyment is publicly performed. That visibility reinforces the idea that happiness is happening now and happening together. Even people who dislike the heat can feel pulled along by the collective momentum. And finally, summer is simple. Its narrative is uncomplicated. Warmth is good. Growth is good. Brightness is good. The other seasons ask for nuance. Autumn invites reflection. Winter demands endurance. Spring implies patience. Summer just shows up and says yes. People don't necessarily prefer summer itself. They prefer the version of themselves they're allowed to be inside it. Despite the mosquitoes, people tend to prefer summer because it amplifies life. Days last longer, movement feels easier, and social connections become effortless. Even when it's uncomfortable, summer creates the sense that time, energy, and possibility are briefly more abundant. And if you're from the far northern hemisphere, you finally get the feeling back in your toes.
Fanon sent this in, and I have to admit, I've wondered the same thing. Why do people believe they were someone important in a past life and not just an ordinary person?
People who believe in past lives rarely imagine themselves as ordinary. They don't picture themselves as farm hands, servants, or someone whose name never traveled farther than the village they were born in. They picture importance. They picture exception. Napoleon, Joan of Arc, revolutionaries, generals, people history bothered to remember, which is odd because history mostly didn't bother. If you add up every human who has ever lived, you get something on the order of 100 billion people. Against that number, the count of household name figures barely registers. We're talking fractions of a fraction of a percent, something like 9/millionths of 1%. Statistically, believing you were once famous is less likely than winning the lottery, and then winning it again, and then doing that 20 times in a row. And yet, no one ever remembers being a peasant. No one recalls being indentured, enslaved, conscripted, or simply tired. No one remembers a life spent carrying water, raising children who didn't survive, or working land they didn't own. The kinds of lives that made up nearly all of human history somehow never make the cut. That tells us something. Not about reincarnation, necessarily, but about discomfort. Importance feels like meaning. Obscurity feels like disappearance. People don't just want continuity across lives, they want justification. There's also narrative ego at play. Not arrogance exactly, more like momentum. If I'm here now thinking about myself, surely I must have been someone worth carrying forward. Someone exceptional. Someone interesting. And who says past lives had to be people? I'm pretty sure in my past life I was a puff of lacquer vapor. Chances are you weren't Vlad the Impaler. You were probably a Bolshevik finisher named Vlad the Inhaler, choking on a cloud of me. As the thought settles, the image changes. Two figures from different empires, stripped of names and outcomes, playing a meaningless game. No destiny, no triumph, just repetition, chance, and silence. That feels closer to the truth. People imagine meaningful past lives because people are egomaniacs. Famous lives feel validating. But most famous people weren't great humans. Culture isn't held together by memorable names. It's held together by ordinary people living ordinary lives.
You know the routine. Subscribe, like the video, write a comment, and please visit us on Patreon. It's not like my job depends on it. Wait, I just got a memo from the producers. Apparently, my job does depend on it.
But Janice, I told him,
Here we are in the year 9, marching again in the cold, deep mud. How's that bonk you took to your noggin doing? Dude, you dropped a full jug of wine on my head last night, but thanks for your sudden concern. Yeah, sorry about that. Dreadful waste of good wine. Hey, did I ever tell you about a guy I knew named Leif Longstride? Oh, God, here we go. Well, he got hit over the head so hard, he thought he was a pine tree. Seriously, the guy was so convinced that whenever someone came near him, he would throw up his arms and pretend to sway in the breeze. Yes, you did tell me this story before. He's the one that got struck by lightning, right? Yup. Crappy way to die. Actually, the lightning didn't kill him. Really? The tree he was standing next to fell on him and killed him. Of course it did. Where are we heading anyway? Dunno. Someplace in Germany called the Teutoburg Forest. Sounds nice enough. Sure hope they've got good beer there.